So with President Cyril Ramaphosa set to deliver his State of the Nation address tomorrow, we ask, what are the most pressing issues currently facing South Africans? In fact, the country is looking forward to hearing how the President's economic recovery efforts will impact many people's lives amid the COVID-19 pandemic. For a look of what to expect, let's bring in now Senior Research Fellow at the Trade Collective, Ms. Lebohang Pheko, who's with us via our telephone line. Ms. Pheko, always great getting your take on these issues. Thanks so much for making time. You know, part of the objectives for the Third National Planning Commission, which you're a part of, is to create conversations that will lead to the establishment of effective and efficient social compacts. That's just one of them. How, if in any way at all, does the President work to that end when he takes to the podium tomorrow?
So if we just recap quickly towards what happened last year, his key talking points. The first was defeating the COVID-19 pandemic. The second was, as you rightly say, accelerating the economic recovery that has emerged from the hampering of the economy during the COVID-19 pandemic. The second to last was implementing reforms that can create a sustainable economy and inclusive growth. And finally, fighting corruption and strengthening a weakened state. And I think that's probably where we can levitate, because the composite of these four elements leads to the notion of what a social compact should be. So a social compact in the context of governance and public sector leadership is really bringing about a visible form of leadership in the public sector which makes things happen. And this is through a variety of modalities: technical expertise and competency, visioning and prioritization, providing accountable and transparent leadership, accountable and transparent policy making, and as you rightly say, creating a sort of dialoguing and interactive, interfacing spaces between the state and its citizens, the state and the people whom it seeks to serve. And I think what we're seeing at the moment is certainly that some of this has been muddied slightly by accusations of political interference, accusations of corruption, a lack of funding, or the misdirection of funding to in fact deal with some of the issues around, you know, the COVID-19 compact, recreating jobs and so forth. And I think we're certainly far adrift if we look at our unemployment figures and so forth. We are certainly far adrift from a re-galvanized economy that is vibrant, that seems to give hope, that seems to be aspirational, and that seems to create a space and a place for the talents, the hopes, and the energies for South Africans to be able to take their place in society. Yeah,
we have been told many a times that SONA is meant to kind of set the tone for the year ahead. Part of the things that you mentioned is that, you know, we also need to be in a context where we're creating some kind of interactive interface. And I wonder to what extent you believe that even just the tone of the State of the Nation address is correctly pitched for ordinary South Africans.
That's an interesting point. So the one thing around the tone is that it certainly always seems to interface and to sort of be almost a precursor to the budget speech. You know, lots of number crunching, you know, lots of numbers around. For example, you know, last year we were told about the 430,000 opportunities that have been supported through the COVID stimulus, 180,000 that are open for application, and I have to say not many of them have been taken up because of the bureaucratic red tape, and so forth. I mean, a lot of lovely numbers running around an investment project pipeline worth 340 billion rand. And I think you raised an important and an interesting point, Ayanda, around the relatability and how this really begins to trickle to a person who is sitting in their home wondering when they're going to get their next meal, how their children are going to get through the school year, even the school week, in fact, whether or not they're going to be able to meet their week-to-week, day-to-day, month-to-month financial, social obligations, and how any of this translates into an aspirational message for them. I think the other thing that's quite useful about the State of the Nation is that it is ideally supposed to set up and set a vision for the future. So I think, you know, we just came out of the January 8th statement, which I've described as the ANC essentially speaking amongst themselves and we as a nation eavesdropping, right? That's not an address to the nation. It's an address to the ANC. And I think that the waters have become muddied. SONA, on the other hand, is about talking to us. And I think that what we have been told, in fact, you know, we'll probably hear about state capture, we'll probably hear about state capabilities or lack thereof. We'll probably hear a bit more around state-owned enterprises and so forth. But I think that when we consider where South Africa is ranked right now in terms of world inequality reports, in terms of the Statistics South Africa's latest surveys, household surveys, I think they've just finished or in the middle of consolidating the national census, which will give us a lot more of a sense of where people are situated financially, socially, economically, geographically, what are the patterns of distribution of wealth, health, and the lack thereof.
Yeah.
It does remind us that we need something that is not just encouraging for the moment, but that is also able to be measured, and that we can come back in 12 months and say, this happened and this did not happen, and we can measure why it didn't happen, and we can tangibly see evidence of what has occurred. Otherwise, it does, I mean, I think SONA is almost becoming something that we can often, pretty much predict the keynotes of what is going to be said.
Absolutely. Speaking about things you can measure, some things are quite elusive, but it doesn't mean they're not important. Many people have come forward to mention that among the long list of challenges the president has in the lead up to tomorrow is to convince South Africans that the Constitution is more than just words on paper, that it actually means something in a context where we've seen senior government officials or senior politicians, dare I say, come out to question how effective the implementation of the tenets of the Constitution actually has been.
Interesting one, because in fact I was actually reflecting on how we've often spoken in South Africa ad infinitum about what a wonderful constitution it is, and how it often seems as though the experience of the living constitution, the living word of the constitution, in the context of what we're discussing, which are people's real life issues, real life challenges, poverty, precarity, despair, and so forth, and the uncertainties and the vagaries around them, how this is then translated into something in the Constitution that is more than aspirational. But the other thought that I was having, Ayanda, is that despite all of this, what the Constitution has managed to do is it does embed a sense of systems and institutionalism, which I think has actually protected and preserved our country from for the last 28 years, from perhaps things that might have been even more that might have become governance crises. So, for example, we look at the fact that the Office of the Public Protector for some years was under great attack under the previous Public Protector, but because the office and the Constitution the Constitution protects that office, it was difficult to just willy-nilly remove an individual who seems to be unpopular or who seems to be getting too close to the trail, and so on and so forth. We see again, even with the appointment of the recommendation, I should say, of the new Chief Justice, that even though there have been critiques around the manner in which perhaps some of the commissioners conducted themselves on the JSC, the fact that there is actually a transparent, accountable process that brings the whole country into its confidence is something that, frankly, is quite remarkable. And even though I still say that nobody eats a constitution, I also do think that a constitution is something that can be malleable. It is supposed to be a reflection of us. It's something that isn't static. It should be a living, breathing document. And when we see processes like this, I do see it as the constitutionalism at its best. Whether or not how that transfers to folk who are living in difficult circumstances is probably a different conversation.
Always great getting your insights on these issues. Thanks very much indeed for making time. Plenty's been said. I imagine plenty more still to be said as we count down to tomorrow. For now, thanks once again. Ms. Lebohang Pheko is a senior research fellow with the Trade Collective, also happens to be part of the 3rd National Planning Commission.